Hello again everyone, today's video is again sponsored by Amazon UK App Store. The Amazon App Store is a place where you can download and play all of your favorite mobile games, and you can save up to 20% on any of your in-app purchases using Amazon coins. To all of my UK viewers, click the link down in the description or in the pinned comment to get free 500 Amazon coins that you can use in War of the Visions, Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, or any of your other favorite games that you play on the Amazon App Store. Thanks again to Amazon for sponsoring this video. Let's get to the action. Hello again everyone, welcome back to another episode of FFBE, War of the Visions. My name is Mars, and today we are going to be talking about all of the different stats and mechanics in War of the Visions that most people may still not have kind of figured out yet, okay? So when you look at a character, you see this whole rap sheet of stuff, and so today's video is basically designed to be a guide to help you understand what each of these stats do and whether or not there's something you should be concerned about with a particular character's build. And so we're going to go through them one by one just to make sure that everybody understands what each and every one of them are. And then we'll also talk about status ailments, because status ailments, we don't run into them a lot, but I'm sure we will continue to run into them in the future. So if you understand what they are, it can help you, figure out how to handle them. So today's video is all about being that glossary to give you your one-stop shop to understand how everything works. So we're going to start off with the most basic of stats, which is your HP or your health points. Health points basically determine how much damage you can take before a character goes down, and that's all there is to it. There's not really anything complicated about that stat. Speaking of not complicated stats, we have attack and magic, and as I'm sure you could surmise, attack increases your physical damage and magic increases your magical damage. One thing that's important to note is that magic doesn't seem to increase the potency of healing from mages that, might cast healing spells on your party. In other games, that's a common thing to have happen, but in this game, I've not seen anything that has described magic as increasing healing potency. I don't believe it works that way, so just keep that in mind when you're building your healing mages. Now, the next important stats are your TP and AP. TP stands for technical points, if I remember correctly, and AP I think is action points, and they are kind of an ebb and flow between each other. You use them in synergy, and I'm sure you're already familiar with this if you've been playing for a while. But the mechanics of technical points, these are your non-offensive abilities that typically are not aimed at dealing damage, but it's supporting your character or your party in some way. And you have a fixed amount of TP that you can use at the beginning of the battle, and there are some ways that you can restore them, but it's not very common. Now, typically you'll use your TP abilities to help fill your AP bar, and your AP allows you to select different offensive abilities to use, or in some cases maybe it's a healing ability or other more aggressive, non-supporty, non-buffy sort of things. So it's important to know when you use a TP skill, it gives you 50% of the TP's cost in AP. So if you use a 30 TP skill, it will give you 15 AP that you can use in following turns. But aside from that, landing your normal attacks gives you additional AP, and you get more AP depending on which facing of the target you hit. So if you hit a target from the front, you get 8 AP. If you hit them from the sides, you get 14 AP, and if you hit them from the back, you get 20 AP. So if you can land those positionals, you're going to get a lot more AP out of it, which means you're going to be able to land a lot of your stronger attacks more frequently. Now, in addition to the AP that you can generate from landing attacks from front, sides, or back, killing a target also gives you an additional 4 in addition to whatever you landed. And then if you land a critical hit, that gives you an additional 4 as well. So if you land a normal attack from the rear and it crits and it kills somebody, you could get as much as 28 AP in a single attack. So that is something worth mentioning or keeping in mind. Another thing that's worth keeping in mind is that mages tend to start the battle with more AP than physical or melee jobs. Mages have a predetermined a predetermined sort of passive that makes it so that any mages that are not red mages start with 75% of their total AP bar, and that's why people like Medina are able to drop their fat, disgusting LBs from the first turn. Red mages get 50% of their total AP bar at the beginning of the game, and any other non-mage job starts with 18 of it. So this is something you can keep in mind to help yourself math out how much starting AP you would like when you are going into battle. Now the next thing that we want to talk about is not necessarily a stat, but it is a mechanic in the game, and it is called CT. CT is basically the in-game timer that activates while you're in the middle of a battle, and it determines how quickly a unit can act. So the way that this works is that when a character's CT fills up to 100 or more, the game then gives that unit a turn, and then as that unit takes actions, it depletes their CT and puts them, back towards the bottom of the turn order. So there are a number of things that you can do to gain CT or reduce CT in opponents, and there are things that you can do to kind of exploit the turn counter as well. So, for example, when it's your character's turn, they have 100 CT or more that they've accumulated, hence why it's their turn. And anytime they use an action, it consumes 80 of that CT. So, and actions include either moving or taking an action, whether it's shooting or casting a spell or attacking. So if you deplete your CT by 80, then that means your turn will come up faster. So if you just stand still and fire, or if you just move only and you don't use an ability, those sort of things will only deplete 80, but if you do both of them, it will deplete all of the 100 CT, forcing your character to have to wait until it fills to 100 again. So this is important to keep in mind. It can come in handy if you're trying to outpace an opponent and you're already in a good spot, like your character's where you need them to be. Just have them park there, attack, or have them park there and cast their spell or whatever. Or if you don't have any useful abilities that you need to use and you're trying to re-engage, just move only, don't use any actions. That way you can get your CT filled faster before your character gets to take their turn again. Now, knowing what CT does, we're going to talk about agility, which is another stat that influences how quickly your CT builds up, and it also increases your evasion rate. So agility is a very, very powerful stat because it can allow you to lap some of your opponents if your character is fast enough. So high agility characters get their turns more often, and they are also more likely to evade attacks. Speaking of evading attacks, the other two stats that kind of factor into that are dexterity and luck. Dexterity mainly increases a character's accuracy and their critical hit rate. So if you have a character that you're really concerned with using to snipe evaders, dexterity is really, really useful because it gives extra accuracy and it increases their crit rate. So that's really, really good. The other thing that luck does is it increases your accuracy as well. So if you're like me and you like running a Frederica who uses, accuracy weapons and accuracy stuff so that she can just snipe people, luck is helpful for that, and it helps with evasion. So it's honestly a really, really powerful stat to make use of. Critical is another stat as well, and obviously this increases your ability to inflict critical hits, which is super, super good. And it also increases your character's ability to evade critical hits. So having that critical stat makes you less susceptible to criticals, and it allows you to inflict them more. So the more you know. All right, the next two stats are very similar to one another. They are defense and spirit. And defense and spirit function very simply. If you have plus 10 defense, then you have a 10% reduction on physical damage. It is a 1-to-1, in terms of percentages. So whatever your defense value is, that's how much percentage your physical damage is reduced by. So very, very helpful to have that. And it works the same for spirit, but against magic attacks. So if you're looking to defend against magic attacks, equip a lot of spirit. If you're looking to defend against physical attacks, equip a lot of defense. It's really very, very simple. Now, the two stats that are a little more complicated because they influence a lot of things are bravery and faith, and there have been a lot of in-depth guides that talk about bravery and faith before. I'm just going to give you the quick and dirty about how both of them work. They are kind of inverses of one another. Bravery and faith both affect the rate of reaction abilities activating. So reaction abilities are those blue abilities that any character can equip, and those activate, whenever a target attacks you, right? So bravery, a high bravery increases your chances of activating a physical reaction ability, and high faith increases your reaction with magical abilities, or when taking magical damage rather. So when you take damage, high brave and high faith means you're more likely to activate those abilities. The other thing that brave does, in addition to increasing your counter rate with reaction abilities, is it increases your physical damage. So with maximum brave, it helps you dish a lot more physical damage. So on your physical damage dealers, make sure you get your brave as high as possible, and you can do that through the barracks the most easily. It doesn't require any attention at all. You just put your character in there, set it to brave up, and you're good to go. And the drawback, of course, is if your brave ever drops below 9, the character turns into a chicken, which any of you who have been chickened before, it's obviously not a good thing. They take more damage, they can't really do anything. And your brave drops whenever a character dies in battle. So don't let your characters die if you want them to have high brave. And if they do die, just toss them back into the barracks to regenerate that brave. That's not a big deal. Now, faith also has a lot of complexity to it. It does so many things. So first of all, the higher your faith is, the more magic damage you do. So if you have a mage who's a caster who does a lot of damage with their magic spells, then you want your faith as high as possible. The other thing that faith does is it increases your susceptibility to magic of all kinds. So if you have high faith, you receive more healing, and if you have high faith, you also receive more magic damage. So keep that in mind when you're building characters as well. If you're building a tank, for example, like Thancred or Engelbert, they naturally take extra magic damage. They have a negative magic resistance, right? So if they also have high faith on top of that, they could be absolutely decimated by mages. So sometimes you might want to balance their faith a little bit lower, or maybe you want to bring a healer so that you can heal their large HP pools more easily. Just bear it in mind when you are building your party. The other thing that is very important to keep in mind about faith is that high faith increases the chance of inflicting status ailments or buffs, okay? So if the caster has high faith and the target has high faith, then you have the highest chance of a spell going off, whether it's a buff or a debuff. So, I'm sure you've noticed if you have a time mage, they cast haste or they cast slow. Sometimes it just misses. Or if you have a healer, sometimes full life or raise just miss. And that's because it has to do a faith check. It checks the faith of the caster against the faith of the target, and if the faith of both of them is higher, then the chance of it going off is much higher. If the faith of both targets is both the caster and the target is lower, then it's not as likely to go off. So keep that in mind as well. This makes it so that somebody like Ayaka or any other buffing mage, it's a good idea to have them have high faith so that their stuff goes off a lot. And it can also be a good idea for characters like Miranda, for example, who uses status ailments. If she has high faith, she has a very high chance of getting those status ailments off, and it makes her much more effective. Now, as I'm sure many of you know, the most effective way to raise your faith is in the barracks, just like with Brave, but if you want to do it manually, the other thing you can do is bring Fina, and she can cast her Brave buff on your party in battle, and that buff persists outside of battle. So that is handy if you want to do that. That pretty much covers today's guide about the different stats in War of the Visions. I didn't really see a guide that kind of covered all of them in one place so that you could have a glossary and a textbook where you could just kind of like see the definitions for everybody. So let me know if there's anything that you learned from this video down in the comments below, and I'll see everybody in the next video.